Hello, welcome to another episode of CoinBlock. I'm Charles, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 0xCert ICO. I'm just going to call it xCert ICO throughout the video. It's just easier for me to say. I'm not a financial advisor, and this is definitely not financial advice. Always remember to do your own due diligence. I'm not paid, sponsored, or affiliated with any of the ICOs discussed in today's episode. The views expressed in this episode are just my own personal opinions. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and of course hit that notification button, because investing in ICOs is time critical and it would be such a shame for you to watch all my content only to miss out on the latest ICO offerings. And of course, please be aware of any scammers impersonating me online or on Telegram. If you want to verify whether or not you're talking to me, you can go to the About section of my YouTube channel and send me a direct email there. I also have my own Telegram group. I'll put the link down below in the description. So when I look at an ICO, instead of diving headfirst into the white paper, reading for hours and hours only to discover that the ICO project isn't for me, I just want to break it down and look at the core mechanics or fundamentals behind that ICO project. I want to know what their soft cap is. I want to know what their hard cap is. I want to know how many tokens are allocated to pre-sale, private sale, and VC investors. And I want to know what bonuses were awarded to those investors. I also want to know the lockup period for those tokens and what happens to unsold tokens as well. These are all things that have to be at the forefront of your mind before you even think about giving money to an ICO project. The second thing I like to look at is really the company profile and team behind the ICO project. I want to know if they have the grit, the foresight, and the potential to really follow through and execute upon the vision that's outlined in their white paper. And finally, I want to assess the amount of hype and marketing awareness in the crypto space for that ICO project. There's no point of me chucking money at something if people aren't going to be talking about it in the next 6, 12 or 18 months time. So in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the 0x ICO. And the 0x ICO basically wants to create an open source protocol that validates the ownership of non-fungible tokens. Now, of course, no analysis would be complete without throwing in some other ICOs. So I've already reviewed these ICOs in my previous videos. You can always go to my channel and search for them there. And I will be discussing some of these ICO projects in relation to xCert later on in the video. So in order to understand xCert a little bit better, we really first have to understand what is a fungible token, and indeed what is a non-fungible token. So the Ethereum blockchain uses the ERC-721 protocol for non-fungible tokens, and non-fungible tokens just hold information instead of value. The best example I can give you is something like CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties was the first use case for non-fungible tokens. Just as you cannot change your passport for a passport of another person, so too with non-fungible tokens. In other words, non-fungible tokens are unique, are non-divisible, and are not interchangeable. By contrast, traditional ERC-20 tokens and other cryptocurrencies, as well as traditional fiat currencies, are actually fungible. They're fungible because they are interchangeable, uniform, and divisible. That is, each unit is identical in specification to one another. For example, my $1 bill has the same worth or value as your two 50-cent pieces. Both sets of tokens, the ERC-721 token and the ERC-20 token, use the immutability of hash functions to record and timestamp data on the Ethereum blockchain. So it's a big idea. What xCert wants to do is really going to be a huge undertaking, and I think there are many similarities between the xCert protocol and the Tari protocol, which was an ICO I reviewed a few weeks back. Both projects really want to cater for the future non-fungible smart contract market, and we can really dive a little bit deeper into xCert by looking at their token use case and really their business model. So the 0xCert business model is really divided into 4 parts. With the first part, xCert wants to connect ERC-721 issuers with non-fungible token holders through decentralized applications developed on their platform, which are used to verify smart contracts. The second thing that really ties their business model together is really open source tools and the libraries that 0xCert is going to use for its SDK, which are provided to developer communities. And the third thing I noticed with their business model and token use case, and really what ties it in all together, is really the proof of ownership. That's really what non-fungible tokens are all about. They're all about tying ownership of an intangible asset on the blockchain to the issuer of that token. So non-fungible tokens do not actually include real asset data. They only act as a proof of it. They are going to be used to digitize assets onto the blockchain. And the fourth part of the 0xCert business model really does hinge on the traditional ERC20 0xC utility token. Yes, that's right, you heard me correctly. The project actually has two tokens. The utility token is fungible and is just used to pay for transaction costs on the 0x network and speculate on the market price of the 0x project. So we can really think of the 0xCert utility token as being agnostic and designed to work between different applications. For the hype, I gave it 3 out of 10. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's a terrible score. But hype isn't a necessary condition for me buying into an ICO, although it is a very, very important condition. Now, a good case in point is something like Bounty 0x. When I started reviewing it, nobody knew about it. So I actually gave it 1 out of 10. Of course, it blew up and it made, I think, something like a 10x back during the bull run in January. Now, I'm not going to say the same thing is going to happen to 0xCert, but I'm just saying that it's important to have an open mind when you look at these things. Market awareness for the project, unfortunately, is not forthcoming. And despite the company having a bounty campaign and listing its ICO on Bitcoin Talk back in April, news and commentary in the crypto space has been lacking for the project. 0xCert's Telegram group is very large, but the market suggests its user numbers are heavily inflated. The project lists Ernst & Young and Feng Shui Capital, which I've never heard of before, on its website, but I was not able to confirm their participation. Now, when it comes to the team, this is really the sticking point for me. I actually gave them 4.5 out of 10. Now, the CEO is Mr. Zhe Zai. Apologies if I mispronounced your name. Now, Mr. Zhe worked as head of growth at Doctrina, a UK-based pharmaceuticals consulting group with 25 employees. Mr. Zhe's expertise really do center on communication and marketing, which were honed and developed across 5 separate small and medium-sized enterprises, including DataBox, an American business management support system with less than 50 employees. The next person on the team is the CTO, Christian Sedlak. Now, Mr. Sedlak worked alongside Mr. Zhe at Doctrina as the company's chief operating officer. According to his LinkedIn profile, Mr. Sedlak gained his corporate experience at more than 5 privately held small and medium-sized enterprises, 4 Slovenian and 1 Swiss, serving as CTO on each one of them. Mr. Sedlak's Behance account suggests he was actually a freelance web developer for these companies rather than the de facto CTO. However, I was not able to verify this. So it's very important you do your own research here. And I see this not only with 0xCert, but with many ICOs. They try to obfuscate the information in their LinkedIn profiles. Now, maybe Mr. Sedlak is a world-class player and he does have the experience, but I just got the impression that he was a freelance graphic designer / web developer. More analysis needs to be done on him. Now, with the chief operating officer, we had Mija Perk. Now, Mr. Mija worked in a managerial capacity at a company you've probably heard of called A.T. Kearney for 4 years, a $1.1 billion Chicago-based consultancy group with over 3,500 employees. Mija really cut his teeth in the late 90s at the multinational software firm SaaS before advising a number of cryptocurrency and Slovenian-operated projects, including co-founded Data Fund, Indigo Consulting, and the Pristop Consulting Group. So this guy is world class. He definitely has a lot of corporate experience. Now, when it comes to the advisors, this is really what concerned me. If the project can't really attract top people, then why should it attract my money? Now, granted, they do actually have a William Entriken as advisor. William has direct experience in dealing with non-fungible smart contracts, having developed the interface for the Ethereum ERC721 protocol. William is also the acting advisor for BLMP, a Singaporean blockchain startup specializing in virtual asset tracking, as well as working as a financial analyst for the prestigious CDI Corporation. Mr. William also apprenticed at the Naval Surface Warfare Center for 2.5 years before interning at Google for 4 months. So there's no doubt about it. Mr. Entriken is definitely a world-class advisor. In this case, I've got no issue with him there. When it comes to the second advisor, I have some concerns, and that's with Dr. Mo Levine. Now, you've probably seen this guy about. He's advising many ICOs, 16 in fact at my last count, including T0, OneChain, Eon, RNDR, Black Moon, D-Market, Dream Team, ICO Box, RSK, Proofsuite, BlockFi, Hacken. Oh no, don't worry, I haven't finished yet. FuzzX, Jabril, INS, and of course Energy Mine. You can't forget Energy Mine. Never heard of them, but anyway. But I just think one could be a little bit more prudent and indeed ethical when it comes to advising other ICO projects. Now, for the token economics, I actually gave 0xCert 7 out of 10. And one of the reasons for that is really their transparency. As I'm sure you're aware, researching ICOs, it's very difficult these days to come across the token information, let alone token information relating to not only the pre-sale, but the private sale. So it's going to have a hard cap of 20,000 Ethereum, which is currently $10.6 million. So with the token economics, there's going to be no vesting or lockups for any of the investors. And the token economics are really divided into 4 parts. In the first part, we see the private pre-ICO bonus set at 40%, but only 3% of the total token supply is going to those investors. So that doesn't concern me. In the second tier, we have the private pre-sale bonus, which is set at 15 to 20%, and 24% of the total token supply is going to those investors. That doesn't really bother me that much, but it depends on how much hype and marketing the project actually gets. So it depends. The third tier is for the public pre-sale bonus, which is 10%, and 12% of the total token supply will be going to those investors. And with the fourth and final tier, we have the main crowd sale, which will be receiving bonuses of 5 to 0%. 11% of the total token supply will be going to those investors. The main thing that stands out for me is that they need to get enough hype to really, safeguard the amount of money that they want to get in there for that ICO project. The second thing that really does concern me is the amount of tokens they're giving away to the main crowd sale. I think it's very unfair that people who get into the main crowd sale only get 11% of their total token supply. It should be at least as much as a pre-sale or more. So if we want to compare 0xCert to some of its competitors, we really want to look at the niches that these other ICOs are operating in. I think this is the best way to do a very quick analysis. So protocol ICOs generally do very well in bull runs like we had back in January. I like protocol niches very much, but they are hit and miss. Protocol ICOs do very well, given that they have good fundamentals. If you look at something like Bounty 0x or Gifto, they're operating in a niche that I'm not too fond on. Now, when it comes to marketplace ICOs, I don't actually like marketplace ICOs at all. I just think the idea is ridiculous because you can do a marketplace without the use of cryptographic or blockchain technology. But Bounty 0x and Gifto did very, very well back in January just because it was a bull market. You've got to remember, if you want to invest in an ICO, you have to look at 3 things. you need to look at the hard cap in relation to the total market capitalization of all altcoins and Bitcoin. You also have to look at the market capitalization of Bitcoin, and you also have to look at the market capitalization of all altcoins. So you really have to look at macro trends in the cryptocurrency community and see where it's heading. I really can't stress that enough. Now, when it comes to blockchain niche ICOs such as Simple Token or Light Streams, where you can actually build dApps on top of their protocol, which means that the multipliers are there. But again, it depends on what Bitcoin's doing. Now, with something like 0xCert, I don't think they've got the grit to pull this off. I don't think they have blockchain experience. And that's why I gave it a similar score to Limpo. Now, just because I gave it a similar score to Limpo doesn't mean to say it's going to perform in the same way as the Limpo project. You've got to remember, Limpo was operating when the market cap for all altcoins was much higher than it is today. So it's going to be a difficult one to pull off. And now we get to the good stuff. Now we're going to be looking at the positives and negatives behind the 0xCert project. So there's 6 things I like about 0xCert and there's 6 things I don't like. So the first thing I like about 0xCert is that it participated in Ian Bellina's World Tour, which is increasingly seen by many ICOs as a community that they have to get in on if they want to get noticed on the ICO circuit. The second thing I like about the project is that it's designed for dApps that require a non-fungible infrastructure that ensures interoperability. In other words, 0xCert's business model is not mutually exclusive and could include cooperation with other blockchain projects. The third thing I like about 0xCert is that it has lots of perceived value. The project has many parallels with the Limpo ICO, which I reviewed back in January, such as good documentation, strong token economics, a mediocre team, and a big idea that taps into the minds of people who don't know what to look for when buying into an ICO. In other words, greater fool theory could be used to attract buyers under the belief that another party is willing to pay an even higher price. The fourth thing that really stood out for me with the 0xCert protocol is differentiation. It differentiates itself from other competitors by having a very clearly laid out token economics structure. You've got to remember, the majority of ICOs today either embellish the token data or try to just mislead investors by hiding important private sale or pre-sale information, and that's just not on. And I don't really think this is the case with 0xCert. If I can give them an extra mark for transparency, then I would. The fifth thing I like about it is really what they want to do. Non-fungible smart contracts could support the fractional ownership of goods and assets, such as educational certificates, fine art, wine, or even real estate. And the final thing that stood out for me for 0xCert is that it streamlines blockchain adoption by providing an agnostic framework or middleware layer for different platforms. So I did see a video about this with the CEO who was interviewed, and he said they're starting off on Ethereum, then they're going to be moving on to WanChain, and then hopefully in the future Neo. But it's important to remember that at such an early stage, ICOs can just say what the hell they want. It doesn't mean to say they're actually going to follow through and act on it. And now we get to the negatives. So there are 6 things that really do go against this project. The first one is key members of the team, such as the CTO and CEO. They have 0 blockchain experience. 2, the project only has one strong advisor, Mr. William Entriken. The rest are weak or too committed to other ICO projects, such as Dr. Mo Levine. The third thing to note is that 0xCert has a very well coordinated bounty campaign. Not only does this diminish the authenticity for the project, but based upon the Howey test, profits that come from the efforts of a third-party promoter, like a bounty, actually constitute an investment contract transaction and are therefore subject to SEC security regulations. The fourth thing I didn't like about 0xCert is really the lack of partnerships. According to their Telegram group, partnerships and announcements will be detailed on a rolling basis. The project needs a strong network effect if it is to be successful. Without business partnerships in place, clients will not be able to adopt non-fungible tokens into their framework. The fifth thing I didn't like about xCert is the market they're operating in. Several components of the xCert protocol use verification tools and SDKs for which there are many similar competing projects, such as the recent Unibright ICO, Simple Token, Lightstreams, OneLedger, and BlockLider, among many others. And the final thing that I really didn't like about xCert is the technical white paper. It's just not technical enough. The DAO Stack and Enigma technical white papers, if you read them, provide the reader with a full synopsis and design overview about how their respective projects are going to tackle the problems of distributed ledger technology in a verifiable and permanent way. And xCert just doesn't do this. So in conclusion, where do I see xCert? Well, I've been reviewing a lot of ICOs now. I think I've reviewed over 200 ICOs on my channel already, and also I have many ICOs that I've reviewed for my personal investments. And I'm starting to build up a picture of what ICOs do well and what ICOs don't do well. Now with xCert, I would have been very bullish on it if the market as a whole was bullish like we had back at the start of the new year. But right now there's just too much risk to really invest in something like this. The main thing that goes against this project is really the team. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Charles, why are you wasting our time? Why are you talking to us about a project that you think just isn't going to do well on the market? Well, I never really said that, did I? I've looked at many projects in the past that have similar credentials to xCert and have gone on to do very, very well. One case in point would be the Credits ICO. I was very harsh on them. I didn't think much of their team, and they did phenomenally well. So I'm really trying to be as neutral and objective as I can when I look at these projects. I do think the website and the way it's put together is very, very good. But there's almost an incongruity when it comes to me looking at the team for this project. I can't really reconcile in my head how a project like this can look this good on paper and yet have such a lackluster team. If you compare them to the Tari ICO, which wants to do essentially the same thing, only with privacy layers incorporated, there's just no competition. You know, Tari has an extremely competent team with former developers from Monero on board. This isn't the case with xCert. However, I'm not going to rule it out. If this gets a lot of hype at the last minute, this could be something to watch. But as it stands, I am neutral on the project. As you can see, I've got some cognitive dissonance here. I do like the project very much, but I'm just very unsure about the team. And I think that's reflected quite well in my scoring. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and of course hit the notification button, because investing in ICOs is time critical and it would be such a shame for you to watch all my content only to miss out on the latest ICO offerings. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.